Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much to PILnet and to the DAV for the opportunity to speak to you today. And thank you very much as well to President Schellenberg for the kind introduction that he gave earlier. As has already been mentioned, European Lawyers in Lesvos is an independent German charity which was set up, well, the project began in June 2016 and was incorporated as a German charity in July, the period through July to October 2017 with the very kind assistance of Dentons. The work that we do is that our team of Greek asylum lawyers and volunteer European asylum lawyers provide free independent legal assistance to asylum seekers on the Greek island of Lesvos. We've been operational in Moria, which is the main refugee camp on Lesvos, since July 2016. Now, as you may know, and as has already been mentioned, Moria is currently home to about 10,000 asylum seekers. I'll get the hang of this eventually. Home to over 10,000 asylum seekers, vast majority of whom have fled from Syria, Iraq and Afghanistan. The vast majority of them live in Moria itself, which has recently been called by the BBC, as has been mentioned, the worst refugee camp on earth. Over 8,000 asylum seekers reside in Moria, and the capacity of Moria, the official capacity, is only 3,100. So it's almost 3 times over capacity, and you can imagine, I think, what that means in reality. Moria is basically a relatively small ex-army base, and it is currently home to more than 4,000 women and children, including over 300 unaccompanied minors. The numbers and situation in Lesvos, as you probably know, is getting worse. Almost double the number of people arrived this year compared to last year. So whilst there have been some efforts to actually decongest the island, in reality, it's still way over capacity. In terms of the work that we do and the reason that we do it, we all know the kind of the emerging situation in 2016 and the problems, the immediate and obvious problems that were associated with that, providing food, providing shelter, providing means for people to actually live from day to day. But I think one of the most important things, and indeed one of the most important things for us to remember, is that actually everybody on Lesvos has applied for asylum. And asylum, as we know, is a legal process. And it is an extremely complicated legal process. It's one that changes all the time. Just by way of example, one of the key elements of the legal procedure is the issue of vulnerability. And whether or not somebody is considered vulnerable determines which legal pathway they follow. Now the mechanism and the procedure for this has actually changed 3 times in the last 12 months. So you can imagine how difficult it is for the people who are going through the process to keep up with it, never mind the lawyers who are actually assisting. Moreover, there is no state legal aid at first instance. So there are no lawyers to help provided by the state before an asylum seeker's interview. Indeed, there should be legal aid at second instance, but in actual fact at the moment that practically is not provided either. So what this means is that the vast majority of asylum seekers go to their interview without ever having spoken to a lawyer. And without access to a lawyer, without access to legal information, inevitably people don't understand their rights and they don't understand the procedure they're going through. And I just want to give an example to kind of put this into stark relief. When we first began our work in July, August 2016, we had a few lawyers and we had a few cases, and I was in the camp one day talking to an asylum seeker who had actually already done his interview. And so there was nothing we could assist him with at that time. We were just talking to him. And it really struck me at what he said, because I said, okay, well, how did your interview go? How was it? And he said, oh, it went really well. Great. I'm very confident. And I was like, okay, fantastic. Why? And he said, well, I know the situation in Greece, and I know the economic crisis in Greece. I myself am a truck driver, and I said in my interview, I told them that I would be, if they gave me the opportunity, I would be the best truck driver in Greece, and I would contribute to the economy. I'd pay my taxes. I'd spend money in the shops, and I'd help the Greek economy. And that will mean that I'll get asylum, right? And I said, okay, but that's all well and good, but why did you actually leave your country? And he said, well, because I'm from a persecuted religious minority, and a militia murdered my family. And I said, okay, well, did you say that in your interview? And he said, no. I don't want them to think that I'm weak, that I'm going to be a problem, that I'm going to, be a burden on them. Now, logically, what he said makes complete sense if you know nothing about asylum law. The problem is what he actually said was the worst thing he could possibly have said from an asylum law perspective, because he didn't actually explain why he left his country and instead made it look like he was an economic migrant. I think 5 minutes with a lawyer would have had a significant impact in actually changing his understanding of the process and enabling him to be much better aware of what he was doing and prepared for his interview. And indeed, I'm sure as well that with proper legal assistance, 2, 4, 6 hours worth of individual counselling, he would have understood the process and he would have been able to articulate his claim in a way that actually reflected his need for international protection. So that was really, for me, it illustrated, I think, why lawyers are so important, and I remain as convinced about that as ever before. I've put up here our mission, which is to ensure that every asylum seeker on Lesvos is able to receive free initial legal assistance from an independent European lawyer with experience in asylum law in relation to their asylum application and or Dublin family reunification application. In terms of why, obviously there is the obvious humanitarian element that we've all seen in media reports. But from a legal perspective, we believe that unhindered access to independent legal assistance from a lawyer is a fundamental right and vital to protecting human rights and upholding the rule of law. As I've mentioned, asylum is a complex process, particularly in Greece, which actually has a kind of an emerging asylum law procedure. There was a whole new law that was brought in 2016 following the EU-Turkey deal. And also to harness the solidarity of lawyers across Europe. I think this has been one of the most refreshing and maybe surprising elements of it, of running this organisation, is that just the number of people who are really, really enthusiastic about volunteering their time, either taking their holiday or indeed taking actually unpaid leave to come and volunteer in Lesvos. We've had over 500 applications from lawyers to do this. And I think that it is something that we as lawyers, we must all fundamentally agree on, that every legal procedure that we go through, whether it's something as simple as buying a house or whether it's something as complicated as a billion-euro merger, requires a lawyer to help the respective client through the procedure, to understand the procedure, to get the correct advice, and to act in a lawful way. And when it comes to asylum law, which is, in some cases, can potentially be a matter of life and death, then the need for a lawyer is even greater. In terms of our programme itself, in terms of the team, we have a coordinator, which is myself, a legal coordinator who is a Greek asylum lawyer. She's been with us for 2 years, and an additional Greek asylum lawyer who's been with us for about a year. So we have 2 full-time Greek lawyers and then up to 6 volunteer European lawyers who, as I mentioned, all of whom are asylum lawyers, practicing asylum lawyers, members of a European Bar Association, as well as 2 legal assistants and obviously interpreters as well. In terms of what we do, what we focus on is preparing people for their interview. So speaking to people before their first instance interview to get them ready for it, to explain what the process they're going through is, what asylum as a concept is, and then going through their individual case to basically listen to their story, identify with them the strengths and weaknesses, identify maybe what additional evidence we can get, go through the kind of questions they'll be asked, basically doing everything that an asylum lawyer would in their home European jurisdiction to get the person ready for their interview. And this is to give people the best chance of articulating their claim in a way that actually reflects their need for international protection. We also, and because we work in the camp, obviously we're approached very frequently with questions about the asylum procedure and various miscellaneous questions related to it. The other, probably about 20% of what we do is family reunification under the Dublin regulation, which is more about collecting documents to prove, for example, family relationships. So if somebody's wife is here in Germany and the husband arrives in Lesvos, to demonstrate that they are indeed married, to progress the reunification application. And we give 3 times per month information sessions to the people in the camp. And here is a photo of one of the sessions. This is the aim of these sessions is just to give people a very, very basic understanding of their rights and the procedure, and then encourage them to go and see a lawyer properly. So you can see that there's about 100 people at this session, which our Farsi interpreter didn't really thank us for, because then the next day there were about 90 Afghans wanting assistance there and then. But it's good to get people aware of what the work we do. So we're the largest provider of legal assistance to asylum seekers on Lesvos, and approximately we're able to advise about 40% of the camp, which I think illustrates how great the need still is, because there are other organisations, of course, working on Lesvos, but it means that there is still a significant proportion of the camp who never speaks to a lawyer at all. We're also the primary provider of legal assistance to unaccompanied minors who have been incorrectly registered as adults, because the way that the registration process works is maybe not as potentially robust as it could be. Sometimes children will come and say they're 18 because the smuggler has told them to say that, when in fact they're 16. In other times, they will say, I'm 16, but they'll be assessed by the person who's registering them as over 18. So then it begins a whole legal process, or a legal process needs to begin then to try and overturn that. Again, this is something that can only be done with a lawyer. We can't realistically expect a 16-year-old boy who's arrived from Afghanistan or Syria, who doesn't understand the language, doesn't understand the procedure, to be able to navigate this on his own. We're also the primary provider of legal assistance to asylum seekers in detention. We've done about 200 of those cases so far. Just to take a step back and look at the kind of the work that we've done overall and the summary of the work that we have done. So we've so far welcomed 141 volunteer lawyers from 17 European countries and provided legal assistance to over 8,400 people, which is around about 4,000 cases. Main nationalities, as you would imagine, people from Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Iran, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And again, as you would imagine, a huge number of these people are vulnerable, traumatized, victims of war, conflict, victims of torture, survivors of SGBV. And over the last 2 years, our volunteers have given over 32,400 voluntary hours. And I think that this is an important moment just to emphasize that none of this would be possible without the volunteers. They are the ones who come and give their time, and without their incredible commitment to pro bono and to the rule of law, the work we do would not be possible. Just as well to look at the outcomes, because I think it is very important as a concept to provide legal assistance, but it's also important to actually measure that impact and try and see that impact. And of the over 1,300 people who have actually informed us, who have received their decision and informed us about it, 74.5% have actually received international protection, received asylum, compared to an average in Greece of 46.5%. I think that illustrates the value of having legal assistance, whether it's from our organisation or another organisation. It demonstrates that approximately 30% greater chance, on average, of receiving the protection that people are entitled to if they qualify, if they have a lawyer. We've helped almost 2,100 people to be recognised as vulnerable, and which means that they can actually leave Moria, leave the island, because everybody who arrives is initially put under a geographical restriction, so they can't leave the island. Only if somebody is recognised as vulnerable or as part of a family reunification application can they actually leave the island. So that's an important element of the work that we do as well, along with helping over 650 people be recognised as eligible for family reunification with their family members in Europe. And very finally, whilst the need on Lesvos is great, arguably greater than ever, it's obviously not the only place in Europe where there is a need for legal assistance. Other locations in Greece, Athens, other Greek islands, Spain and Italy, and one of the things that we're looking now in terms of 2019 and beyond is to expand beyond Lesvos and to try and meet the needs in other European locations where there is a similar lack of legal assistance and a huge need in terms of the asylum seekers themselves. And very finally, just to touch upon what President Schellenberg mentioned earlier, I've put on here our website and our current funding appeal. Please, if you're interested, you're very welcome to have a look at that and read our funding appeal. It's available in English, French, German and Spanish, and my contact details as well. If you're interested in volunteering, if you're interested in learning more about the organisation, then please don't hesitate to send me an email, or I'd be delighted to speak after the presentation. Thank you.